So the joys of making videos for YouTube is that you get to practice. This is the third time I'm recording this because the first time I hadn't hit record. The second time, the audio did not record. And so I'm hoping the audio is recording right now. Hey, it's Editing Charlie here. Again, apologies for the grainy picture. Um, I honestly don't know what happened to my audio. um, I had my AirPods on, so it really shouldn't have sounded as bad as it did, but it did. So apologies in advance for just the grainy audio. Right. So I've been tagged by Kitavan from Kitavan Reads. Thank you, Kitavan. In a book tag called Why Haven't I Read These Books Yet tag, which was created by Greg from Another Bibliophile Reads. I'm going to tag both of them below. Do go check out both of their videos. I really enjoyed Kitavan's video. And in fact, I've picked up two more books from there. One is So Many Islands, which is giving you a consideration around what it's like and all the different considerations that one has to think about when living on an island, like supplies and like safety and security from like even just natural disasters, pandemics, epidemics, etc. So I think if I understood correctly. And the other book was Gangtown, which is a book that looks it's a nonfiction that looks at gangs in Cape Town, but also looks at gang mentality in general. So I think sounds very interesting. So I'm definitely going to check those out. But anyways, let's get into the tags. So I have 6 tags, and basically I need to tell you why I have not read these books. So let's start off with the first one, which is a classic. And the classic that I have not read yet is No Longer at Ease by Chinua Achebe. Chinua Achebe is known as the grandfather of African literature. I have read Things Fall Apart twice, but I only read it for the first time in 2017. So yeah, I was very late. I was very late to Chinua Achebe. And so, no, I'm not longer at ease. Things Fall Apart is the first book in the African trilogy. No Longer at Ease is book two, and book three is The Arrow of God. I think it's The Arrow of God or Arrow of God. I can quickly check here. Yeah, Arrow of God. And so I don't own Arrow of God yet. And so maybe that's the excuse I was making up in my head was like, let me get all three and then I'll read all three. But the truth is, there is no excuse for why I haven't read this. It's been on my shelf for a while. And so I am planning on reading Things Fall Apart one more time in preparation for No Longer at Ease. And that will then force me, not force, encourage me to get the Arrow of God or Arrow of God to complete the African trilogy. I've also seen a really beautiful African trilogy combined book at Exclusive Books that I may actually just end up getting instead. But I still want to read this one because it's what I own. So why haven't I read it? Honestly, haven't thought about it. A, B, haven't thought about it, but considering reading it this year. Then the next one is fiction. And the book that I have for that is Khaled Hosseini's And the Mountains Echoed. Back in 2010, I joined a book club when I lived in South Korea, and that was my first time ever being introduced to Khaled Hosseini through A Thousand Splendid Suns. That book broke my heart apart and ripped me to shreds, had me in tears. Now, when I was mm, 14 years old, I found a book in my library written by a 14-year-old Afghani girl about about her life and up until the point when the oh man, I've forgotten what those guys are called. The Taliban, when the Taliban came into Afghanistan and what that did to her life and how she had to escape to France, etc. And that really made me so aware of a whole world of women and girl children who are suffering because of patriarchy. I mean, I didn't have these terminology in my head, but it just made me so aware of that. And so Afghanistan was a country that I always thought I would like to learn more about, but I never actually put too much effort into until I read Thousand Splendid Suns and Khaled Hosseini's writing. Absolutely beautiful, descriptive, emotional, reflective. And I was like lapping up his works. I loved The Kite Runner. I even watched the film and I was like, I'm here for it. So when this book came out. In fact, I got it in sale. I got it back in 2013. I was like, this is it for me. This is it for me. And I never picked it up. I genuinely don't know why. I suppose the size could be potentially intimidating, but it's only 402 pages. So it's, in terms of actual pages, it's not that big. And the writing size is not that small. It's pretty standard size. I do think what happened was I ended up doing my MBA, and so you end up reading a whole lot of other things and not, not making time for fiction. But I also think that I'd heard a few negative reviews about it, and so that kind of put me off, I suspect. I do think I want to pick it up. I do want to read it and formulate my own opinion of this book because I really did thoroughly enjoy Thousand Spent Suns and The Kite Runner, and I haven't actually read anything around Afghanistan in a long time. I am aware that I'm reading the same guy on Afghanistan, so I do have plans to read other authors from Afghanistan to kind of mix things up. But I own this now, so I might as well read it. It's not going to be anytime soon, but maybe 2024. Maybe 2024. All right, then the next tag was non-fiction, and the book that I picked up was Dead Aid by Dambi Samoya. Dead Aid, Why Aid is Not Working and How There is Another Way for Africa. So I bought this book at the OR Tambo, that's our international airport here in Johannesburg in South Africa, when I was returning back to South Korea. Just all of these books, actually, it's quite interesting. A lot of these have some kind of connection to South Korea. And so I bought this at the airport along with another book that I also haven't finished, but I've chosen to show this one today. And in essence, I'll just read the back quickly. All right, so this, as you saw, Dead Aid. So it's basically questioning, is aid, just giving money to African countries, the best way to help African countries out of poverty? So it says, we all want to help. Over the past 50 years, and so this book was published in 2009, we all want to help. Over the past 50 years, $1 trillion of development aid has flowed from Western governments to Africa, with rock stars and actors campaigning for more. But this has not helped Africa, it has ruined it. Dambi Samoya's excoriating, I need to learn what that means, excoriating and controversial book reveals why millions are actually poorer because of aid, unable to escape corruption, and reduced in the West's eyes to a childlike state of beggary. That in itself is what actually hooked me and is the reason why I bought this book. I wanted to understand, how do we change the narrative that the world has of us of being the basket case, the beggars of the planet. Dead Aid shows us another way. And so I was like, oh, thanks, Dambisa. Using hard evidence to illustrate her case, Moyo shows how, with access to capital and with the right policies, even the poorest nations can turn themselves around. First, we must destroy the myth that aid works and make charity history. What more? What more would I need to read this? This book's also pretty short. Like, if you take out the notes and the bibliography, it's actually only 154 pages. It's 150 pages. I could read this today if I wanted to. I'm not going to read it today. I got a couple other. Maybe I should read it. But it's an interesting book that I was really interested in when I bought it. And at that stage in my life, I read probably, I'd say 70% nonfiction, 30% fiction. And so I genuinely don't know why I didn't read it back then. I know that when I came back to South Africa, I was like, oh, I'm going to read it when I get back, which is why it traveled with me to Korea and it made it back with me from Korea. Especially when I was doing my MBA, this was a book that would have been so good for me to have read as part of the argument. Some of the subjects and courses that I took talked about like Africa and strategy around Africa and, reigniting the economy. And this would have been a great book for me to have read. I don't know why I didn't read it. I have no idea. It's such a short book. And I even had started it. Right? I had. My bookmark is this is a KTX ticket. So KTX is like a fast train in Korea. I went to Seoul on the 22nd of October for something. I think I know what this was. I think yeah. I think I was going for the Whitney Houston concert. So a quick funny story about that incident. So bought the tickets, and these guys say, so we bought the tickets online for Whitney Houston. I bought it for myself, my sister, and my best friend Nicole. And we were like, we're going. We lived in Daejeon. The concert was in Seoul, and we took a bullet train. It was so much fun. Like we got prepped, got everything ready. We got in the bullet train. We got there. Now, what they had said was you need to print the tickets out and bring them with. Like even like, which is weird for me because in South Korea everything was so like you used your phone for everything back then. Like even before like NFTs were a huge thing, they had their own version of NFTs. Like I remember our cards tapped back then, and coming back to South Africa, I felt like I was going back to the dark ages. Phones at that stage weren't tapping yet, but certainly your cards were. So there was a lot of NFT technology. And so I remember feeling a bit weird that they insisted that we print the tickets out and bring them with. But I did it. I went and I printed out my tickets, and then I left them in my apartment in Daejeon. So I had to buy a bullet train to rush back. Thankfully, we came early to the concert. So we get to the front, and the guy's like, I'm not letting you in without a ticket. So we came in early, very, very early. Like, I think the concert was like 3, 4 hours later. So I was telling my sister and my friend, and I said, stay, I'll go fetch them. So I get back on the subway to get back to the train station, to get on a fast train back to Daejeon, to get in a taxi back to my apartment. I think I even asked the cab driver just to wait to take me back. Did I? Actually, it would have probably would have been faster for me to take the subway. Um, now I think about it, sorry, I'm just going to drink something. This video took too long to record. Um, and then back in time, it was a phenomenal concert. I made it. I'm so glad I did that trip. I was mad, big mad at myself because I wasted. Let me see how much this ticket was. 20, it's like $22. I wasted $44 plus, and that's not including like the subway and the taxi costs to get in between places in between. Anyway, sorry, went off on a tangent there. Then the next book is genre. So I was confused about that, but I'm just gonna go with my favorite genre, apparently, which is fantasy, even though I haven't read enough fantasy. I was looking at my stats again. I've only read 5 fantasy books this year. I've read 44 books this year. Only 5 of them are fantasy. Like Charlie do better. Anyways, the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin. I have not read this. I have not read this. And I know I haven't. And the reason why I haven't is I want N.K. Jemisin to be my favorite author of all time. I presently own physically 5 of her books. So I own the entire Broken Earth trilogy physically. I own The Killing Moon. Oh, actually, I own 6. The Killing Moon, The City We Became, and How Long to Black Future Month, which was the first book of hers that I bought, How Long to Black Future Month, and I haven't finished it. The only book of hers that I've read is and finished, also the shortest book that she's written, is Emergency Skin. That is absolute perfection, sci-fi perfection. If you have a chance, if you are on Kindle Unlimited, go check it out. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. I think it's part of like a collection of sci-fi stories collected by somebody else. I can't remember who. But it was available on its own on Kindle Unlimited. Loved it. It was short, but it was crazy. The things that she's covered and connected into. She's a phenomenal writer. And so I want her to be my favorite author. And my goals are I'm going to have basically, when I get more shelves, I'm going to have a row of like Octavia E. Butler's books, everything that she's ever written, everything that N.K. Jemisin has ever written, everything that Nnedi Okorafor has ever written. And whilst I know that I'm not gonna like I already know which books of of Nnedi Okorafor that I don't really fully enjoy. But Octavia Butler, the books that I have read, I have really enjoyed. But there's some that I've enjoyed a little bit less. Like for example, Parable of the Talents, I didn't enjoy as much as Parable of the Stoa. But I'd still get both of them and have them physically on my shelf. And in much the same way, I feel the same about N.K. Jemisin, that's why I've collected all of the books. But a lot of people have basically said they didn't enjoy The City We Became and The Killing Moon, or I think it's the Dream Blood duology. And so they say like her best work is the Broken Earth trilogy and the Inheritance trilogy. I don't own the Inheritance trilogy, so that's the only one I still need to get. The Inheritance trilogy plus the Inheritance novella called The Awakened Kingdom. So I need to get all of that, and then I can say that I own every single physically. Oh, plus also the Shadowed Sun. I don't own that as well. Um, and so I feel like there's a lot of pressure on me to love this because everyone says that this is phenomenal. It is the winner of a Hugo Award. I hear it's like her best work, and out of the, I think it goes in this order. In this trilogy, apparently, the best ones are 1 and 3, from what I've seen on BookTube, Bookstagram, and Book Talk. And I think I'm scared. I'm scared that I may not love it like the way I'm supposed to. But I'm reading it this month. Not even this year. I'm reading it this month. I'm reading the entire trilogy this year, but I'm reading it this month. So it's not going to be on this list for too long. All right, and then the last one is an unread book owned for the longest time, and that I believe is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. Now, at some point, I wasn't sure between these two because they were both bought in 2010, but I think I bought this earlier in the year. I genuinely don't remember when I bought this one. I just know I bought it in South Korea. All right, so Shantaram is a memoir autobiography by Gregory David Roberts, who at some point in time in his life was a convict who escaped prison in Australia and ends up in, he calls it Bombay, but I suppose it's Mumbai now. But I suppose when he went there, it was Bombay, and he wreaks havoc. He has an amazing time there. He makes mad money. He lives the life. And then eventually he gets caught and ends up serving out the rest of his 19 years of his prison sentence for a series of armed robberies that he committed in Australia. And this is his story. Now, I had started listening to the audiobook back in 2010. There was no Audible or Scribd back then, so I was sailing the high seas, is how I got that book. But everybody did it then. Um, and I was really enjoying it. I remember thinking that it was such a really good book, and I really enjoyed it. But I was convinced by a good friend of mine, who is also from South Africa, teaching English in Korea, who had actually read Shantaram, and she's like, "It's such a phenomenal book. I think you'd enjoy it better as a physical book." Reading or listening to books or consuming books through audio wasn't as huge then as it is now. And so I stopped. I kind of wish I hadn't. I definitely would have finished it for sure because I was listening to it like I used public transport a lot to get between places. I was teaching English at a university at the time, and the trip from home where I lived all the way to the university could take anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. And that's a good amount of time of listening and consuming a book, especially if I would eventually have learned about listening at 1.8 times speed and the likes. So why didn't I actually pick it up? I genuinely don't know. I don't think I was intimidated by the size of it, certainly not by the pages. Um, I, in my time in Korea, also this is my very tattered Long Walk to Freedom. I do have a newer copy of this. Um, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, which I bought in Korea from the same shop. But it's so interesting to see like the size difference. This was like 850 pages. This was like 930 pages. So they're not too different in terms of thickness in theory, but the size is so much smaller. And this took me 6+ months to read. So I took my time. And so I can't imagine that I wouldn't have taken my time to read this. And I was enjoying it. Like when I think about this book fondly. But for whatever reason, I haven't picked it up again. And so I am thinking of picking it up uh, in December or taking it with me. I'm hoping to be in Europe next year, and I might take it with me to Europe. It's a big one, it's a thick one, but like take it with me and just have it as a book that I just take my time and read throughout the year that I'm in abroad. Um, but we'll see. So yeah, those are the books that I have not read, that I own, that I haven't read yet. And the last tag is for me to tag some people. And I would like to tag Charity from Bookdom Charity, Kushi from Kushi Kishore, and Sandra from Got a Thing About Things. Oh, Got a Thing for Things. I have tagged the three of you because I really do enjoy your content. I enjoy the books that you read. I have picked up some books that I really enjoy after your recommendation, or books that I think I will enjoy. And so it'd be interesting to see which books you wouldn't read or haven't read and why you haven't read them yet. So I've tagged the three of you. Once again, thank you, Kitavan, for this tag. It was fun, despite me having to record this 3 times, and hopefully this is the last one. Happy Sunday.